Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Later in the programme we'll be exploring the latest ups and downs for the Eurozone, assessing the impact of that extraordinary prisoner release on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and talking to Oscar-winning movie director, the one who gave us Traffic, Erin Brockovich, Ocean's 11, 12, 13. Apparently there's not going to be another one. But anyway, Steven Soderbergh is with us today too. But we begin with Libya. Yesterday brought the news from Sirte. The last stronghold of Colonel Gaddafi's regime had fallen. Just a few hours later, of course, as you will have recalled, later in the day, even more sensational news. Colonel Gaddafi himself had been captured, not just captured, but killed. It was all a bit confusing. To help us clarify the situation, I'm joined now by Guma al Gamaty. He's been with us before, the former British coordinator for Libya's National Transitional Council. And former because, what, you're going back to Libya now?
Yes, I'm hoping to go back home very soon, by the end of this month, after 31 years of being away from Libya.
That's very exciting. And what's the latest you hear today from Libya?
Well, obviously, after the momentous day of yesterday, there have been huge scenes of celebrations and relief and joy. The people of Libya feel that after all the trauma and suffering and bloodshed and violence and all the martyrs and the people who sacrificed themselves over the last 7 months, at last a dark episode is coming to an end. I think yesterday was a major juncture in Libya's history. It's the end of one era and hopefully the beginning of a new one.
And in terms of that new era, we heard in advance that the Council had said that they were going to form a government as soon as Gaddafi was removed, in this case removed from this earth, and so on. When will that happen?
I believe the plans are for the NTC, the National Transitional Council, to make an official announcement tomorrow, Saturday, in Benghazi, declaring that Libya is now free and totally liberated, and that the Gaddafi regime has been totally toppled and removed, and that officially the transition period begins. And also they will start straight away deliberating to form a new transitional government which is supposed to run for only 8 months, and then after that there will be elections of a special council of 200 members, and that will have a mandate to run for only 12 months further, and those further 12 months should be the time when a new constitution is drafted, debated, and then put to a referendum, and then final elections, both parliamentarian and presidential.
And what about ex-members of the Gaddafi government or forces or army or whatever, people who were known to be loyal to Gaddafi, not necessarily in terms of crimes of violence and murder and death, obviously, that's different. But I mean, people who were actually part of the Gaddafi government, will you be prepared to have them if they're the right people?
Well, already members of the NTC, some of them have been ex-ministers under Gaddafi regime. I mean, the head of the NTC himself, Mr. Mustafa Abdel Jalil, was a justice minister for 3 years under Gaddafi, and others as well. But they have made a courageous decision back in February to actually, part company with Gaddafi and side with the people and support the revolution. So there has been many tens and hundreds of people who worked under Gaddafi, held very high positions, but made the right decision and sided with the people against Gaddafi because they saw that Gaddafi was intending on killing as many Libyans as he could to prevent them from demanding their rights of freedom and justice. So they sided with they stood with the right side. So those people are now in a position where they can serve their country and they can take positions and they can enjoy the same rights as everybody else.
Do you think in a way it was a pity that Gaddafi, as it happens, was killed? Is it a pity that he's not alive so he can stand and face a court?
Well, we have always argued that the ideal scenario, the best outcome would be or would have been to actually apprehend Gaddafi, arrest him alive, and then make sure that he is treated humanely and according to international standards, and then put on a trial for all the crimes he has been responsible for against Libyans, not just in the last 7 months, but also over the last 42 years. That would have been the ideal outcome, an ideal scenario. Unfortunately, that is not the way things have panned out yesterday. It is not anybody's fault. It is not the NTC's deliberate policy not to apprehend them alive. In fact, the orders were to apprehend them alive. But when you have young men, fighters, who have been fighting for 7 months, who may have lost their friends or their family members, who may have seen women and young women being raped, gang raped on orders by Gaddafi, who may have been highly charged in that situation. It is very difficult to control how things pan out, and still we don't know exactly the sequence of events in those maybe an hour or two between when Gaddafi came out of that drainage hole looking bloody and injured and clearly shot and dazed, and then when it was declared that he was actually dead. We don't know exactly what happened. I think that will come out in the coming days and weeks, but you know, whatever happens, the main thing now is that an era has come to an end, and that a dictator, a very brutal, evil dictator who has been responsible for huge suffering in Libya, has seen his own fate and his own end, and the end of his family and all around him. It shows that, it vindicates that, you know, if you behave like that, you do not win at the end. It is the people who are on the side of goodness and good human values and the right to human values who always win at the end.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. We hope you find the solutions and your people find the solutions. It's not going to be easy the next few months, but we all hope to see you succeed. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me here, Mr. Frost.
Thank you. A meeting this weekend was expected to come up with a plan to rescue the euro. But even before the summit, disagreements between Germany and France led to a late announcement that another summit, next Wednesday, will be needed too, to do the business. And is it already too late anyway? This week has seen a 48-hour general strike in Greece, with violence and tear gas around Athens. Meanwhile, there have been the so-called Occupy Wall Street protests in 900 cities and 80 countries around the globe. One country which is affected by all of this is Finland, which is both a Euro member and the scene of Occupy Helsinki protests. The Finnish Minister for Europe is Alexander Stubb, and he joins me now from Helsinki. Very good to see you again, Alex. Is it in fact, is there a worried, tense atmosphere financially in Helsinki today?
Not really. I mean, to be quite honest, wonderful autumnal day and a little bit of sunshine. We have some issues with unions and strikes, but nothing major at this particular stage. But of course, if the global economy is hit, Finland is hit because 40% of our GDP comes from exports and 50% of our tax income comes from exports. So in that sense, the situation is of course worrying.
Absolutely, from that particular point of view. But these mass protests and so on, do they surprise you, or are they a fair comeuppance for banks and others?
I think they're fairly fair, to be quite honest. I think the global economy is right now in shambles. We created a system of economic governance some 60 years ago, and now we have a whole bunch of new players, the likes of Brazil, the likes of China, the likes of India, and they want to have their say. There's a certain frustration towards banks, which is understandable. There's certain frustration towards the public sector in general and the way in which the international economy is run. So I understand where the frustrations come from, and now we just have to start fixing it.
And in fact, in terms of fixing it and so on, you have a situation you've mentioned where Europe started off as being basically political with a bit of economics on the side, and now that's really reversed around. It's now an economic headline, and the politics is on the side. I mean, there is that difference. The economy has got more and more central, hasn't it?
Definitely. I mean, usually when the EU is in a crisis, it's been about enlargement or it's been about decision-making and institutions. Now it's about two fundamental things. The first one is the euro, and the second one is Schengen and free movement. On the euro, I think the basic problem is the following. You cannot have a monetary union, in other words, a single currency, without an economic and a political union. And what we're trying to do is fix three things simultaneously. One, solve the Greek problem and the crisis so it doesn't spill over. Then, number two, we want tougher rules for the future so that this doesn't happen again. And then number three, we want growth. And trying to balance all of these three things at once is by no means an easy feat.
And how would, given their current disagreements and so on, by next Wednesday, how can France and Germany resolve their differences?
Well, I hope that they resolve them. The basic problem is that we're getting too intergovernmental. We should have, first of all, everyone involved, and secondly, most certainly the EU institutions and the Commission. I think you have basically two camps here. You have those countries who've taken care of their public finances and they do not want to pay anymore for the mayhem and mishits that countries such as Greece and others have done. And secondly, you have those countries who, of course, are fighting for both their economic and political survival and want to make sure that the European Union and other member states help out. And this is the balance that we're trying to fix, and it's not very easy. My take is quite simple. First of all, you need more money for the banks, and it's especially the countries themselves that should save their own banks. Secondly, we need to solve Greece in one way or another. And if all of this requires, for instance, more money from the IMF, I think we'll simply have to accept it.
And how contagious is the situation in Greece? I mean, if Greece had to admit they were at the end of the road and so on, and default, how catching is that among the countries that are also in difficulty, you know, like Portugal or Ireland?
Well, of course, there is a possibility for the disease being caught or catch somewhere. The problem is we don't have a real vaccination. I would argue that there are four options here. One is to continue with a second Greek package. I hope that takes place. Two is to go with a Greek package and a controlled restructuring of the debt. Three is to go for an uncontrolled restructuring. And then four is to kick Greece out of the euro. Of course, no one wants to even talk about options 3 and 4, and we're working especially on option number 1. Now, the funny thing is, or actually sad thing, paradoxical, is that Greece is only 2% of the European economy. And that 2% is shaking the whole European economy, and with it, I would argue, also the whole global economy. So we must avoid any spillover, and that's why it's important that our European leaders take a little bit more time and hopefully solve things the latest by next Wednesday.
But given what you just said, 2% and so on, does that suggest that, in fact, you know, it would be a cleaner situation in the rest of Europe if Greece did default? It's only 2%, and it would clean up the picture a bit?
David, I can't really suggest that because we're going day by day, basically hour by hour.
Yeah.
We're trying to find creative solutions. One of the key moments here is a report coming from the IMF, the ECB, the European Central Bank, and the European Commission. They will tell us whether Greece has taken care of its bit of restructuring the economy and so on and so forth. But the most important thing, of course, is to ring-fence the situation in such a way that it doesn't spill over, especially to Italy or to Spain. I think Spain is actually doing quite well. Italy might be on slightly shakier ground, but I'm very confident, optimistic that we'll be able to ring-fence the problem. People will understand, the markets will understand that a solution will be found by next week.
And you really think it will?
Well, you know me, I'm an eternal European optimist. I think now the show is being driven very much by the markets. I think we all realize how serious the situation is. I don't think there is an option not to succeed. Therefore, when EU leaders have their backs against the wall, they will come up with a solution, and that's why I remain optimistic that we will have one by next week.
Alex, thank you very much indeed for your optimism and your company. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, David.
This week saw a historic deal come to fruition between Hamas and Israel, releasing captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in exchange for the eventual release, about half of them so far, of 1,027 Palestinian prisoners. As Hamas celebrates, what does this mean for the future of its rival Fatah's negotiating power? Is this a new beginning in relations between the Israelis and the Palestinians? Or is that a wild exaggeration? Joining me now to discuss the ramifications of the prisoner exchange, as well as its hopes for the future, is the Professor of Philosophy and President of Al-Quds University in Jerusalem, Sari Nusselbeh. Welcome we're delighted to have you with us. Tell me, what about the basic question, does this exchange carry any significance with it?
I think it carries a great deal of significance, and the significance, I'm afraid, is negative rather than a positive significance as far as the peace process is concerned. Because what it basically tells us is that the Israeli government has decided to reach agreement with Hamas, bypassing the Palestinian Authority, strengthening thereby the popular position of Hamas within the territories, in the knowledge that Hamas does not represent the face of a peace partner, but that the Palestinian Authority led by Mahmoud Abbas does. And therefore, I'm afraid that in terms of the political process, the significance of this particular exchange is really one that does not look very, very positive. Of course, you know, this is not looking at the sentiments, the joy, the happiness that there exists among people that their children, their brothers, their family members have come out of jail. That's all, you know, very well and good, but the question was about what significance this has on the political process, and I think my answer was as it is.
And in fact, today, and in the next few days as people sum up this thing, Fatah's position becomes weaker. Is that what you feel?
Yes, exactly. I think that I think Netanyahu actually worked out this deal at this particular point in time, taking into account, partly at least, the rising popularity of Fatah and of Mahmoud Abbas, which has resulted from the United Nations bid of trying to get the international community to support a two-state solution. And while this was happening, therefore, Netanyahu's deal with Hamas comes to somehow throw cold water on this rising popularity. And I think there are probably other local reasons as well. I mean, Netanyahu has had problems inside Israel to deal with, such as, for instance, the tent movement.
Right.
And therefore it was, as far as Israel is concerned, a clever move, but not a very wise one if the interest is in looking at the peace process as a whole.
If, in fact, the Palestinians have got back more than 1,000 of their prisoners for keeping one Israeli POW for that 5 years, I mean, isn't there an irresistible temptation to increase the number of kidnaps of Israeli soldiers so that it can get another 7,000 prisoners released?
Well, unfortunately, that's how it was read by people. We saw people's reaction in the West Bank, in Gaza in particular. In Gaza, yes, absolutely. People were asking for more Gilad Shalits, and therefore this is an ongoing self-breeding sort of process. Having people go to jail, having people resist the occupation, therefore go to jail, then having more kidnapping, then having prisoner exchanges. And the underlying issue is being totally ignored, and the underlying issue is the occupation itself, and the fact that we really need to create peace between the two sides in order to get over the entire business of kidnapping and of terrorism and of resistance acts and so on.
How can, in fact, this lost momentum for the Palestinians, very lost momentum at the moment, both because of what happened or didn't happen in New York, as well as what we're just talking about here, how can that momentum be regained by the Palestinians? I mean, Salam Fayyad, the Prime Minister of the Palestinians, said this phrase, "Time is not ripe for talks with Israel." Well, they need something, desperately the Palestinians need something to grab the momentum back. What should they do?
Well, I'm not sure that there's very much that the Palestinian Authority can do beyond what it's been doing. It's been making its position very, very clearly, including Salam Fayyad himself has been making also his position very clear. Both Abu Mazen, Fatah leadership, the Palestinian Authority, Fayyad, have been basically saying we're ready for a two-state solution. But the problem is, I think that Israel is not ready, and that the conditions, the objective conditions, in fact, are making it very hard. To such an extent that I personally am beginning to feel, and many other people are beginning to feel, that actually the moment has become past, that it's no longer possible to, in fact, carry out negotiations for an acceptable two-state solution, you know, with, based on 67, with Jerusalem being shared or divided between the two sides. We already have more than 500,000 Israeli settlers living on the eastern side of the green line, which is the line of 67. And it's really extremely hard by now to think how we can go back to negotiations. I'm not discounting the possibility. I mean, I think that individuals, leaders with vision, with courage, can still step forward. But I think really the ball is in Israel's court. And I don't see the ball being played in Israel's court in the kind of way that it can bring about the kind of solution that everybody wants. Therefore, it seems to me that we're headed towards another kind of future. I'm not sure exactly what kind of future that will be.
Are we looking towards a third intifada?
Not immediately. I wouldn't say that people don't react automatically, spontaneously like that. Things take time to brew, to develop. But certainly what the Palestinian people have been able to prove over the years has been their resilience, their patience, their ability to stay on, hang on, and to continue to seek their rights. And I think, one day or another, Israel has to face the fact that they have to share this country, and I mean this country as a whole, with the Palestinian people, either on the basis of two states that are separate, on the basis of some kind of federal system or federation, or on the basis of one state. But they have to do it, and the Palestinians will not disappear.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor. Thank you. Very, very good to have you with us. It's certainly a worrying time, as you have laid out very clearly there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, David.
In a moment, the Oscar-winning movie director, Steven Soderbergh. That's after this short break.